Okay, we're back.
We didn't actually leave, according to you.
Don't look at your watches. There could be some missing time phenomenon going on.
Good thing we don't have a clock on the wall behind us. We should have a clock on the wall behind us.
That never moves. Welcome to Tank Talk. This is part 2 of our discussion about American tank destroyers.
So then they came up with the M10, which was pretty cool. It had a 3-inch, which is a 76.2 millimeter gun.
Not a high velocity though.
No, but it's still you're throwing a whole bunch of stuff down range. The concept behind it was always hard hit and be able to move, shoot and scoot. Interesting to note though that the M10 motor gun carriage,
Yes.
can't call them tank destroyers, was marginally faster than an M4 Sherman. M4 Sherman's top speed was 25 miles an hour. Top speed of an M10 going downhill with a wind behind it with a guy out pushing was 25 to 30 miles an hour.
30, they said tops, but it couldn't maintain that speed.
No, because it would shake itself right
And
to bits.
the original M10 was a 5-sided turret, and it was placed on a Lee hull.
That's called a pentagon, you know.
Yeah. Later,
Building called that.
they then went from the Lee to the Sherman.
And the hull for the Sherman and the Lee was very similar. Very similar? Very similar.
Yeah, close.
Close, yeah. So, and that got us through most of the war. And it was decent until the Germans said, wow, we need a bigger tank.
And so, as we've seen historically, when the Germans upgraded their armor, we just said, I'm not listening, la 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 la. And
We're good. We're good.
We don't
We'll
need to change a
overwhelm you.
thing. Yeah. Meanwhile, we gave about 1,600 M10s to the British. The British said, thanks very much for this.
Good wheels.
We're going to make some mild changes here. And so one of them was that they put a 17-pounder on there. They did this for a couple of reasons.
Good gun.
Oh, excellent gun.
Ballistically very similar to the German 88, except for size.
It wasn't just that the low velocity 76.2 millimeter
yeah.
gun on the M10 was insufficient for the job, but it also required that they'd have to always have ammunition shipped in, transported around, and the 17-pounder ammo was already readily available. So it was a fairly simple thing for them to swap the gun out. They also swapped out the front mantlet.
Mm-hmm. Well, you had to because it was a different gun.
Yep.
But and they called that, I think they called it the Achilles.
The Achilles C. An interesting thing that happened there as well.
This isn't a sidebar, right?
No.
Okay.
Was
Plowing
that
through, man.
the weight of the gun was such that they ended up having what's happening?
No, it was just the weight of the gun.
I thought you were having a little
Try to
seizure or
keep up.
something. It's like, stay with me. Don't go to the light.
Is there a doctor in the house?
The weight of the gun was such that it was too much for the turret to stay in place, and so they put a counterweight on the back. You'd have thought that would have solved the problems,
You'd have
but
thought.
with the 17-pounder, to reduce the recoil, it actually had a weight on the front, and that then made it very difficult for the gun to traverse because now the turret was so heavy.
It's a lot of weight.
Exactly.
So it took you like 10 minutes to get the gun sighted?
Well, that's the other thing. They did not have, the Americans didn't have an electric motor for the turret traverse.
Why don't they just use like a starter motor from a Pontiac?
They had to hand crank it.
You ever seen a starter motor from a Pontiac?
Yeah.
Different story.
Big.
Anyways. So yeah, and there was a lot of collaboration between the United States and the British during the war. It's like, why didn't we just put the Rolls-Royce Merlin aircraft engine into every aircraft? Who knows? Different thing. We're going to come back to that.
We'll get back to that in another episode.
So we realized that we needed to upgun the M10 because the British were doing really well with it, but the Americans, we can't use their stuff. So we had a 90 millimeter anti-aircraft gun. What did the German 88 start off as? Anti-aircraft gun.
Anti-aircraft.
High velocity gun. So we modified that and we took the M10 hull, designed a new turret for it, and put this 90 millimeter high velocity gun on it.
Why couldn't you just put the 90 millimeter in the existing turret?
It wouldn't fit.
Oh,
It's like me trying to wear your shoes. Ain't gonna work.
no.
So, but then, like Chris was saying, you also had to have this huge counterweight in the back because the gun was so heavy. But finally, we had a gun in theater that could deal with German armor. The Panther, the Tiger, and even the King Tiger. Not so good on the King Tiger, but still, you had a better chance with that than almost any other gun that was in theater. So they basically just took the M10, called it the M36 because it had a different gun on it, but they didn't have enough holes of the M10 coming off the production line. So then they took Sherman tanks and put this new turret on it. And so then you had the M36B motor gun carriage. Even though it was a tank in all respects, from the hull up to the gun, they still called it the M36 motor gun carriage.
Its nickname was Little Slugger, if I remember right. And the
Little Slugger.
The interesting thing here
Sounds
is
like a
that it was
candy bar.
an open top turret. They called those turrets grenade baskets. And
I wonder why.
while it gave the tank commander unobstructed visual, so he could see the enemy very easily, and then and also offer support to surrounding troops, because of course you're not having to talk through the radio or you just shout out. It still made them very susceptible to small arms fire, grenades, and of course airburst artillery.
Right. They did eventually put shutters, I guess you'd call them, that you could close the top end, but they're still, not very thick. But sure, it would probably stop the grenades from, coming in and all that stuff, and it would definitely keep the rain out.
The Russians, I just read about this the other day.
We're always reading stuff.
The Russians decided too much trouble, too expensive, and so what they did was they strapped bombs to dogs. And in the Battle of Kursk, they actually used this technique where they had trained these dogs to run under the tank, and on contact, the bomb would explode. I don't think the dog survived, but they took out 16 tanks.
Just a difference in philosophy between the Americans and the Russians. I mean, these are the guys who, if you tried to retreat, your own guys would shoot you.
Could you imagine if you put a bomb on a dog and said, run at the enemy, and it got scared and decided to hide under your truck?
I wonder if that ever happens. And the Americans would go, that's why we don't do it.
Yeah.
So anyways, we've got the M10, the M36 that are good enough. And that's kind of the sums up the whole American armor doctrine of the Second World War. We don't need the M26 Pershing. The Sherman tank is good enough.
Done.
The tank destroyer was, in point, actually becoming redundant, because once they outgunned the Sherman to the high velocity 76 millimeter, 76.2.
That 2 is very
And then they had come out with tungsten core shells. Although there weren't a lot to go around, those things could penetrate anything. At 2 kilometers, one of these things were fired and it took out a German tank.
What kind of German tank? One of the big ones or one of the little ones?
Once.
Oh yeah, those. Those are
Okay,
good.
yeah, that's what I know.
Yeah.
That'll show up. That'll show up down there.
So we finally start listening to the people, boots on the ground, and we developed this M18 Hellcat, which was fast. It was 50 miles an hour. It had that same 76.2 millimeter high velocity gun. So finally, you could literally shoot and scoot. There was a battle, I don't remember what the name was, but there was a group of German Panther tanks advancing, and these Hellcats would pop up over this rise, boom, back up, go to someplace else, boom, back up, go someplace else, boom. They took out a lot of German Panthers, and the Germans are like, "Was ist los?" Wondering what's going on. Good little tank. I mean, little compared to like some of the other stuff, but fast, and most importantly to Americans, it looked good.
We had in World War II, we had the Sherman, which was a medium tank.
Yes.
And then at the tail end, we had the Pershing, which was
M26 heavy tank,
a heavy tank.
which had that same 90 millimeter cannon that the M36 had.
So the Germans had the Panzer IV, which was considered a medium tank. Then they had the Panther, which was a heavy tank.
Panther was considered a medium tank.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
but like I said, it pretty much stretched that definition to the limit.
Then the Tiger, which stepped clearly over the line into heavy.
Well, now the Tiger came out after the Panzer IV, so it was Panzer IV, Tiger, then on from there.
Then they
just
had
went
the
crazy.
King Tiger.
Holy cow! But then the Germans started coming out with these tank destroyers, and I would think that the Americans are like, what are you doing? Do you see what we have in the field? Why do you need this? Why do you need a King Tiger?
All of the other American anti-tank, anti-tank motor carriages, whatever you want to call them. I'm getting tired of having to dance around being. Who knew you had to be politically correct about tank destroyers?
Let's just say that we don't call them
Okay.
tank destroyers.
So all of the American tank destroyers had movable turrets, but the Germans didn't. Whether it was the Stug, the Jagdtiger, whether it was
The Hetzer,
the Hetzer, whether it was the Saint Emile, whether it was
Jag Panther.
the Jag Panther,
The
they
Elephant.
were all fixed. But that was because Germany had started to adopt that defensive posture where they weren't going on the attack. They were sitting back now and waiting for the Allies to come to them.
It was also cheaper, and it was less labor intensive to develop a tankless design. You look at the sidebar.
Yeah.
Sidebar. When we developed the Grant tank, the reason why we had that 37 millimeter tank, the cannon in the turret and the 75 millimeter in a sponson in the hole, was that America couldn't cast a turret big enough to hold the 75. We didn't have that technology. So we said, well, we need a gun in a turret. What do we got? 37 millimeter. Boom, we can do that one. It's little. Because it was labor intensive.
So if you want to shoot this big gun, you've got to turn your tank kind of sideways a little bit.
Unless they're on the right. If they're on the right, you're dead. We can get you.
Yeah.
Don't approach them on the left. You're in trouble.
Hey, thank you very much for joining us for this episode. I'm Chris.
I'm Mark.
That's Mark.
That's
And-
Chris. You, Chris.
Okay. Join us next time, and we'll see you then.
Hey, let us know what you want to hear us talk about. We're
Leave
open
a-
to it.
Leave a comment
Where?
right down there. Yep.
All I see is carpet.
Hit the like button, which I'm going to put right there. You can bring your finger down. Right there, stop. Or the subscribe button.
Boy, there's a lot of buttons.
There is. We'll see you next time.
We'll see you next. Oh, you already said that.
I said that. You know what we need? We need a really cool sign-off.
That would be very cool.
Like-
Oh, I know. We can do